Hey there everyone and welcome back to the ES6 training. And in this video, let's focus on the promises. The promises are a good addition in the ECMAScript 6 version. And before I progress into this movie, let me give you a quick example of a synchronous restaurant and an asynchronous restaurant. Now, synchronous restaurant is like a one-man army restaurant where you have just got a one person. He's going to take your order. He is going to cook the meal. He's going to serve you the order. He's going to wash the dishes and then going to bring up the bill onto your table. And obviously, you might have assumed that this is going to be a time consuming process, not very efficient. But yes, it just does the work, but not efficiently. While on the other hand, we have got an asynchronous restaurant, which is really awesome because it has got multiple people. One is going to take your order, another one is going to cook your meal, another person is going to just do your dishes, and another one is going to bring up you the bill. Now again, the same work is being done, but in the second case, we are doing the work much more efficiently and our more resources are actually free in that case as well. While in the first case, the guy is always going to be busy and is not going to do awesome things in just that time. So same thing happens in the asynchronous request as well. Like for example, and right now I'm going to take the examples of the API request, but it just works for all of the web-based requests. So when you make a request to an API call or to a web page, you simply expect that the result is going to come back. But since the result can take some time, just like your meal can take some time in cooking, your web page request may take some time. And if you'll just be staying there that, hey, I cannot proceed because my request is not fulfilled yet, I cannot move further, is not a very efficient idea. But on the other hand, if you just keep on moving that, hey, whenever the request is going to come up, this chunk of code is going to deal up with the things and I'll just continue my coding. That's actually much more efficient. And that's what the promises is. I know it was a long kind of a story, but it's all relative. Now promises the promise is actually a promise that, hey, you have just made a request and I give you a promise that whatever comes up, I'll give you later up to your code. It might be a good request, like your request might be resolved, or it might be a block request. Whatever comes up, I'll just give it to you. Okay. And promises in most of the cases, and by most I mean 90 to 95%, you're going to use that with the web request and the file handling. That are the two major cases. Yes, there can be other cases, but most of the time, either you are making an API request, XML request, JSON request, API request, or maybe handling some of the file, then you use that. So right now, I want you to understand that just completely ignore the syntax, how it goes. Just understand why we are doing, because right now the syntax is not going to work perfectly. Obviously, I'm going to tell you because I'm not going to be filling up the fillers there, but it's going to be exactly how I'm telling you. So there we go, functions. And let's call this as asyn function there. So this is my asynchronous function there. I forgot to put an A there. So there we go, asyn fun for the function there. So this is the asynchronous function there. Okay, now in this kind of function definition, we can actually return a promise there. So I can create a new promise there with a capital P. And there we go, I have a promise there. Now this is how the promise works. Now, whenever you do a promise, in the promise actually, whenever you kind of invoke that, you have an option of passing on a function inside that as well. So right now, let me just pass on a function. And inside this function, there are two parameters, which are again a function. I know it's a little bit confusing, but just bear with me, stay with me. So first of all, we are creating a function. We will use it later on. And in that, we are returning a promise. Now in the promise parameter, it takes just a function as parameter. In that function, the arguments that are passed are resolve and reject, because our request can be resolved properly on a web base, or if you're trying to open a file, it can be opened up, or it can be rejected because file may not be there, or simply our request is not fulfilled because the link might not be working at the time. Okay. Now what you do, you just again write. And by the way, again, right now I'm just writing these resolve, but actually internally they are working like this. So they are both the functions there. So obviously function should have a definition, but you don't need to write them. So I'll just get rid of this. So there we go. Our two words, resolve and reject, they always stands in that order, not like a reject and resolve. You cannot interchange them. So what you do is you write a lot of code and you'll simply say, hey, you know what, when actually the resolve is going to work, I'm going to do let's just say ABC things, and you can just work on with the result there. So with the result, there is always going to be a result there. Okay. And in the reject, there is always going to be an error, maybe the file not found, or maybe web request not completed. So this is the basic syntax. I know it's not proper, but right now we are not working on to the proper syntax. For sure, I'll give you an example of the proper syntax as well, but try to understand that whenever you create a promise there, it takes a parameter as a function, and function has two parameters again, resolve and reject. There you go. As simple as it sounds. Now, interesting part is when you call the function, like for example, when you call this function there, let me just call that and show you how the syntax works on. When you call this function, then you simply have two options, dot then, and obviously I could have just got just like that dot then, and I could have done some things there, and then I could have changed it with a dot a catch where I get the error, but it's not how you will see the code. You will see that people will break that to the next line just for understanding purpose. Then you have got the dot then, in that you always get a result, and then you have got a dot catch there as well, and it has always got the error. There we go, and these are the same name that I'm using. Now based on that, you can again perform a certain functions, whatever you want to do. Like for example, we have learned about the fat arrow functions, and you could have write some line of code, just like I'll use this 888 as some line of code that you are doing here. Same goes for the error. You can use the fat arrow functions, and in that case, let's just say you are denoting that with the 333. So obviously you could have done that. Now obviously we could have just done that in the same line, but this is how you will see the code most of the time. Okay, so this is the most basic thing about how the chaining works, and obviously you could have worked on the if and else case. Like for example, there could be result 1, there could be result 2, and based on that. But right now what we have learned so far is that whenever you create a promise, you get a function. In the function we have got resolve, which means we have got a result. Reject simply means we have got an error, and based on when we call the functions, we can get a then or we can get a catch. Now I know this has been quite tough for you, but let me give you another simplest possible example here. So for example, I'll get my P for my promise, and it's going to be a simply promise there. And as I told you, whenever you create a promise, you get a function there. Okay, you learned that so far, good. And what you get inside the function, yep, there is a resolve and there is a reject. Okay, sounds nice so far. Okay, now in the function definition here, you can just go ahead, and I'll just close this one with a semicolon. You can do a couple of things, like with the resolve, you can do some things, and like for example, let's just call a function like set timeout is a function that we can call quite easily. It takes two parameters. The first one is going to be the function. There we go. And the second one is amount of time that you want to wait. Like for example, I can wait for 1,000 milliseconds there. Okay. And in the function definition, I'll go inside and I'll say, hey, you know what, if the things are resolved, there we go. And I just want you to do something like, for example, I'll say hooray there. Okay, nice. Now this is all happening. We are just making sure that resolve is being cached there. Now obviously this function is always going to be running out. This is not one of the best examples, but I just wanted to show you that some things are working here. Now what you can do, you can just simply say my pay, which is my promise, and you can call dot then just here, but as I told you, most people like to call this as here dot then, and inside that you get a simple function. You can just use the fat arrow function as well based on what you are getting, but right now let's just get things here. So I'll just get a value there, and inside here I'll just do a console log. So console.log, and this is gonna be simply my value there. Okay, now this value is actually exactly the same that we are passing here into the resolve parameter. Usually that comes up from a web request or from a file. Right now we are just getting that. So obviously this is not the best example in the world, but yes, this runs and this works after 1 second. Not one of the best that I have done, but okay, you get a working example there as well as a theoretical example here as well. So that is nice, but we are not completely happy yet here. So in the next video, I'll again take back this promising things, because I know at the starting point it's really problematic. But in the next video, I won't be running the code, but I'll give you more precise and concise example that how promises can be used for opening a file or requesting a web page. And the basic idea is, again, I would like to repeat it, that whenever you create a promise, you may get a resolve request or you may get a reject request. So we write some code so that our resolve can be handled, and we write some code so that a reject can be handled. And that's it. That's really simple. And let's move on and talk about more about promises in the next video as well.